This is a dispatch from the Institute of Magical Historicity. These dispatches come in from across our worldwide network in New York, Zurich, Rochester, Prague, and San Francisco. They are written and read by Institute President Benjamin Wax and scored by the Dean of Aesthetics, Ariel Cruz. They have been peer-reviewed for accuracy by the Council of Three and fact-checked by Institute staff. For more information, visit magicalhistoricity.com. Insight. Once upon a time, there was an idea lost in a woods. It flitted from tree to tree, and when it touched a leaf, it thought it was an idea about leaves. And when it touched a caterpillar, it thought it was an idea about caterpillars. In a clearing, it thought it was an idea about the sun during the day, and an idea about the moon at night. And these were its favorite times. One day, a woodcutter passed through the clearing. He brushed against the idea, and so the idea was carried off with him, out of the woods, to the woodcutter's home. The woodcutter was an angry man, whose wife and children lived in fear of him, and so the idea thought it was an idea about rage. It surged and burned at the small abuses of the world, proposing that this was a way to defeat them, or at least hold them at bay, and it had many contentions about the dignity and honor of oneself, rather than the dignity and honor of others. These things the woodcutter shouted at his family, who grew increasingly silent and sullen and sickly, their eyes downcast and their fists clenched. But over time, the idea did not like how it had been twisted into circles and spirals and endless points, and so it wished to leave of its own accord and become an idea about something else. But when it tried to become an idea about axes, and an idea about wooden plates, and an idea about wool sheets, it discovered that its form had been so contorted that it could not change any longer to fit the things that it touched, and so it could only be an idea about rage, suitable for a woodcutter with a miserable life. And though it did not understand unhappiness, because it was not an idea about unhappiness, it no longer wished to be in this shape, and it remembered those moments when it was an idea about the sun in the early morning, and an idea about the moon shining at night. This pleased it, and so it tried harder and harder, until one day, after much effort, it became an idea about the sun again, even though it was still trapped in the mind of the woodcutter. The woodcutter's behavior changed quickly, as though a fever had been lifted. His disposition lightened, his temper abated, and he smiled and laughed both day and night. When his family and neighbors asked him why, he told them he had had the most marvelous idea, one that made sense of all the world, and made him happy. They asked him what it was, and the woodcutter explained it to them. But of course it was an oddly shaped idea about sunlight, and so the explanation made no sense. No matter what he said, no matter even that they could repeat it all back to him, it made no sense, and did not explain his happiness. Eventually he came to accept that it was a useless idea, and yet, somehow, it still made him happy. And his happiness infected his family, and they slowly grew healthy and outgoing, and the entire village was improved. As he neared the end of his life, the woodcutter decided that it had not been the idea at all that had really made the difference, but his experience of it, and that knowing an idea and experiencing an idea were two very different things, one of which was easy and simple and made little difference to the soul of a man, and the other of which was difficult and trying, but which could change the course of a life. When he thought of that, it changed the shape of the idea again, until it became an idea about that process, which it liked very much. And when he died, it floated free into the world. This has been a dispatch from the Institute of Magical Historicity. The Institute is headquartered in San Francisco with major offices in New York, Zurich, Rochester, and Prague. Dispatches are released twice a month on iTunes, SoundCloud, and other services, with additional dispatches provided exclusively to Institute members. Dispatches cannot be taken for credit, but can serve as course prerequisites. We'd like to thank our supporters, including Carla Palumbo, Molly Vickert, and James Milner. The Institute is a signatory to the Johannesburg Protocols and is in no way affiliated with Benjamin Winter or his estate. For more information, including a selection of workshops, books, artifacts, and certifications in magical historicity, visit magicalhistoricity.com. You can support the Institute or become a member on Patreon at patreon.com/magicalhistoricity.